Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Logistics Executive TV. Today, I have a kindred spirit from the industry, a very important man from an absolutely rock and roll type company in the US. And I've got to say that his organization, as the founder and CEO of Supply Chain Now, is without a doubt the world's #1 ranking podcast for the world of supply chain and logistics. And it is my pleasure to introduce Scott Luton. Scott, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, the day after the elections.
It's unbelievable. And Kim, most importantly, kindred spirits is right. It's been an honor and a privilege to know you for as long as we have, to collaborate on a wide variety of things. And you're way too kind. You called me a very important man. And I tell you, I've never heard those words, but I'm going to go back and tell my mom what you said about me, and it's going to make her day. So great to see you, Kim.
Scott, you too. Thanks to joining us. And I know you have such a rabid schedule most days across most of your platforms, but over a few years now, it's been great to reconnect. Scott, why don't, for our audience, perhaps that are not aware of yourself and Supply Chain Now, perhaps you can give us a bit of a background on yourself, because I know you've got a very interesting DNA yourself and your history of supply chain logistics and all the way back to being serving your country. So maybe you can give us a bit about that, and then we'll rock and roll into Supply Chain Now, which is such an important part of the ecosystem worldwide.
Thank you. You're too kind, Ken, but I appreciate that. A high level overview. I went in the Air Force right out of high school. I got my first taste of logistics. I'd never been in a factory or a plant or a warehouse prior to that point. I loaded planes, cargo in planes a couple times, a couple different exercises for the Air Force. But my full-time job was being a data analyst, and I interacted with our incredible maintainers that we have in the Air Force and really around the globe, supporting any fleet, aircraft and otherwise, which never get enough credit. But after the Air Force, I got out and wasn't sure what I was going to do. Eventually, I found myself working for a mom and pop manufacturer in Columbia, South Carolina. And that really, I fell in love with the world of manufacturing, and went on to spend over 20 years either in manufacturing or supporting manufacturing on a variety of different levels, and interacting with all those folks, especially the fearless frontline. All the stories, the problems getting solved, the innovation, the people, the best part. And I was like, you know what? We've got to find a way to get those stories out of our warehouses, out of our fulfillment centers, out of our factories, and share them with the globe, with practitioners, and of course, with all the consumers out there. And that's what really paved the way to launching Supply Chain Now years later. And for 6 or 7 years now, 1,300 podcasts, thousands of live streams, webinars, own events, and the like. I jump out of bed every day to share the story of end-to-end global supply chain, and it's the best job in the world.
Awesome. And you have a whole range of platforms, which is something that's always amazed me and kept me interested. Whenever I go to your site, I want to see any of the lives or the webinars, which I quite often join in. And thank you for your responses from the chat that you always give me, and the other folks around here that from my company that join in. So informative and a lot of fun. So from your point of view, how did you evolve the various platforms? Maybe you can identify what those platforms are and how those evolved.
Yeah, an excellent question. And, there's no finish line. You're continuously learning. You learn from your successes, you learn from your failures, and we're all, as long as we keep learning, we're doing pretty good. So, but 2 quick points to your question. On the first point, the engagement, you talked about kind of some of the shout outs and chat back. That's one of my favorite parts of what we do. because we try to, where our guests are the star of the show, we try to also make our audience the star of the show, especially in those live moments where they can share their voice and what they think. So that's really, really important, I think, to how we do anything here at Supply Chain Now. And then some of the vehicles, we've experimented a ton over the years, maybe not as much as Jeff Bezos and the Amazon folks, but the current sister properties, I'll call them, which just admire what Sophia Rivas Herrera is doing with Supply Chain Now in Espanol, and really serving the Spanish-speaking incredible community across the globe. Digital Transformers, led by Kevin L. Jackson, really focusing on that global critical topic. Not just supply chain transformation, but how organizations and business and our way of life is transforming digitally. And then National Supply Chain Day, founded by the fearless Mary Kate Love, April 29th, each and every year. Really excited about National Supply Chain Day, as we have reinvigorated it to celebrate especially the people that make global supply chain happen hour in and hour out. So that's a little bit about those different vehicles, and we've got some others up our sleeves we'll be rolling out soon.
Yeah, nothing short of innovation, and you're always coming up with new ideas, which I think must be real positive around your audience. I mean, you've got some fantastic sponsors. You clearly monetized the various key platforms, which of course we've got to do with the size of podcasts that you're running, with the millions of views and engagement levels that you've got. And as I say, as far as I can see, you're still really number one globally, and I think you rank very highly across all podcasts in some sectors. Yeah,
we try. And Kim, I'm gonna have to take you to my next 7 meetings this week, because you talk the best about what we're doing here. Kidding aside, we're a pretty humble group. I'm proud of what me and so many talented team members that's been on this mission with me, and of course Amanda, my wonderful wife, and our fearless production leader. Incredible team. And really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And most importantly, going back to telling the story of what's going on in supply chain and what folks are experiencing, the miracles they produce every day, and hopefully reaching more consumers so that they can continue to get be more and more in the know of why we can enjoy so many things and luxuries as consumers around the globe.
Okay, good stuff. All right, Scott, let's get to it, because I've seen some absolutely awesome interviews that you've done, both on the lives and some of your recorded work. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of those key favorite moments that you've had from some of the conversations and the stories that you've engaged some very interesting people on? What are maybe 4 or 5 of the key highlights for you from those conversations?
Well, Kim, I had to leave my 22 pages of my favorite moments when Kim Winter has joined us. So I will cover that next episode. But there's four moments in recent memory I really wanted to share with you, based on kind of how I was getting ready for our chat here today. And the first one came from a great webinar that we just had in the last couple of weeks, and we featured Lizette Timon with a group called Railco. Now, Railco was spun out of Kohler, which everybody knows, right? The sinks and bath products and stuff. Well, we were having a great conversation about finding success amidst all the chaos and disruption, right? And I was talking about making a point how I feel it's incumbent upon leaders that we've got to find ways, especially in this incredible time of supply chain tech, which we'll get into later, but we got to find ways to free up our team members' time so that they're not always just running the business, right? Running the business. We got to free up their time so they can spend it on making improvements and importantly, living their life, right? Spending time with their families, which is probably the number one priority. And she made a great comment to that. She was talking about, and I completely agree with her, supply chain transformation, which we're all talking about and living day in and day out. It's got to be a full-time mindset. It can't be an hour here, an hour there. And organizations that are really serious about it, and they're not just wanting to talk about it, well, they've got to be prepared to truly invest in transformational leaders, right? That's their full-time job, to create and lead that change. And I think also the other thing she mentioned is it's incumbent upon all of us, no matter where we are in organization, if we to lean into that transformational mindset, how that's got to be a part. It's got to be at least present in every decision, every conversation, much like I think those leading organizations that are really driving big sustainability outcomes, they have found a way to include sustainability and have that be present in every supply chain planning or problem solving or leadership discussion. It doesn't mean the decision always breaks in that on the transformation end or on the sustainability end, but it's got to be present. And I think Lizette made an excellent point there. Let me share number two, and I'd love to get your response on Lizette and Ray Attia is my second favorite recent moment. Now, I had the good fortune of working for Ray Attia years ago. He likes to say working with. No, I was working for Ray Attia. He is a serial entrepreneur. Now that term is thrown around a lot. You've heard it, I've heard it, but Ray has ever since his first job at Johnson & Johnson as a young engineer way back when, I think he's invested in over 20 ventures, and I'm talking major successes, right? Major successes. And Kim, I bet this will resonate with you because this struck me in my bones. He made a critical point, whether he is leading the company he was investing in or kind of a hands-off partner, investor, so to speak. What is timeless and universal is that effective leaders have got to lead all members of their team. You're going to have team members in these environments we're going through right now, which is so fast and it's full of anxiety and chaos and disruption and lots of great things too, right? And you've got certain team members that lean into that and we got to change, right? And in some cases it may excite them. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you got folks that they can be paralyzed and they can be fearful of change. And that's human. We all have that in our bones. And leaders must be sure they're not leaving anyone behind, and they're leading and comforting and pulling up everyone across that spectrum, everyone that makes up the organization. And that really struck with me from Ray Attia.
Sure, I really look forward to it. I didn't catch that one, but I'll definitely go on to your library and have a look at that one.
So yeah. Ray is incredible. What did you think before I got two others, but what did you think on that first one in terms of like Lizette was talking about how, hey, you can't clock in an hour here and clock in an hour or half hour here if we're driving real transformation. Does that resonate with you, Kim?
Totally. I mean, it's just a total evolution. And I think one of the hot points there at the moment, Scott, is of course with AI being so prevalent everywhere, and it's an existential force across all economies and the world in general. But in particular for us who live and breathe supply chain and logistics, things are moving so quickly. There's so much change going on, and you're talking about transformation, the amount of variable, dynamic, moving parts that are within the equation. It means that people have got to be reinventing themselves all the time. You've got to be reaching out. It's almost impossible for any one person to be able to be across all the issues all the time, whether it's leadership, whether it's technology inside the business and the organization. So we've been doing some work here on transformation with some of our clients here in Dubai at the moment. And it's really how long is a piece of string. There's so many factors to be taken into account, which just makes it just awfully challenging, but it's so exciting. And of course, with the aid of technology now, with AI to be able to assist in that process, it makes it more exciting.
Kim, I agree with you. And going back to kind of your first comments there of the sheer complexity of how the supply chain world and all of its facets and sectors and how fast it's moving, how complex it's gotten, even the simple problems have scaled up to be bigger problems. And we have no option but to lean in to technology, right? For our customers, our suppliers, our people's sake. And that reminds me, we interviewed again, Hans Moorman with DP World. And he and I may be the only two Trekkies that have been a part of all 1,300 of our podcast episodes. And at the end of it, we were talking about just the need to embrace technology. And he uttered this phrase, resistance is futile. And that's a Star Trekism for sure. But it's so true. We we've got to lean in to the technology,
Yeah.
because not only is it going to help us change how business is done, my favorite part is it's going to help enable our people to have more successful days, more easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so two other quick things I want to share with you that really stick out. And, Kim, I wish we had 3 hours together. Always do. Always do. Um, let's talk talent for a second, right? Uh, the timeless value of talent, right? It was important forever ago getting in the industry, and it's equally, if not more important now, right? So we've been running this Now Generation series, which is kind of a series within a series at Supply Chain Now, spending time with some of the brightest professional educators and students from some of the most well-regarded supply chain schools, right? And we're going to do maybe you and I collaborate with some schools across the globe, but we've been the likes of Michigan State and Tennessee, Arkansas, and here lately, I sat down with Georgia Tech, right? Georgia Tech, which also ranks on Gartner's top 25 list, and I was blown away. The two students, not only was their communication, which has really been a common thread through all these, the communication and the intangibles of what these students bring into these conversations. That was not me when I was a sophomore or junior in college, right? So that's blown me away. But most importantly, their purposeful perspective on how they want to change this world, supply chain world for sure, but this world, ethical sourcing came up numerous times just in the last conversation. And you could tell they were committed to righting the wrongs and changing so that supply chains work for everybody. And you and I both know there's been some pockets that haven't had the light hitting it that unfortunately we haven't been as a industry, a global industry, we have been making the right decisions there.
Yeah.
But anyway, the talent coming in, I tell you what, Kim, the future is extremely, extremely bright.
Yeah, it's interesting. You should bring that up, Scott. I've just been collaborating over the last few weeks. We finished a 2-day conference with Messe Frankfurt, one of the biggest conferencing companies in the world here in Dubai, and an organization that we partnered with called Studium. A good mate of mine, Willem Maritz, South African, based up here in Dubai, has launched and built and sold a couple of very important online education organizations. He's leaning into the supply chain with our partnership, and we had a very successful 2-day conference with called Logi Careers with Messe Frankfurt, and that was, I would say, one of the most successful conferences in the supply chain in this region over the last 12 months. So,
Wow.
yeah, really exciting stuff. And when you and I are offline, we can talk more about that and perhaps bring Willem into one of our other conversations.
We got to do it. And, I just got a tip of the hat to you, Kim. I have still never, in this modern chapter of my journey, met a better MC and certainly never met a more tireless MC. You are everywhere, and anywhere. I mean, it's impressive, Kim. And I know you love it. I know passion fuels it, but I'm gonna have to check out some of the new events you're part of. Hey, one more quick thing about the last topic I want to mention really quick is China. But before that, one more quick element and tip for folks out there on the talent front, Kim. We all know about mass customization and that trend that's been around for a decade or more. And what came up in a recent conversation with Dr. Sarah Sengupta, who essentially leads the supply chain program and is reinventing the supply chain program at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. She talked about, when I asked her, hey, how can folks engage and hire the top talent in supply chain coming out of schools? And she said, well, one of the things not to do that they hate, we hear it all the time, is canned responses on resumes. That is a big turnoff factor. So any hiring managers out there, if you really want to endear yourself to the top talent, don't use those automated resume tools. Take the time, invest the time, especially with the top of the top, at the top, where the programs and classes you're trying to make inroads with. Take the time and personalize those responses. How's that sound, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Scott. And in fact, we're running a series here of Q&As because we get so many inquiries here, being now our 25th year in
Wow.
logistics and supply chain recruitment since we started in Sydney in 1999. So we're celebrating that with a round of special Q&As this year. And on top of that, we haven't done the launch yet, but it's live. We've got a new website for the first time in over 10 years, which is pretty exciting for us. And it's got a lot of value add, especially around the do's and don'ts and our views and perceptions and inputs on things like resumes, interview techniques, things to help folks in our industry, especially if they're coming across borders from different industries, of how to succeed and how win interviews and how to succeed in the industry. So yeah, lots to collaborate there on.
20 Hey, let's not gloss over 25 years in any industry is to be celebrated. 25 years in the supply chain industry, in the recruiting and consulting industry. Hey, that's like 75 in other sectors. So congrats to Kim, and I'm looking forward to checking out the new website. That's a big project in of itself. So look forward to the next 25.
Good stuff, Scott. Feels like 25 days, my friend, but things
Hey,
move fast.
let's talk about one topic that my age is on, right?
Yeah.
I want to you wrap kind of a couple key moments from programming with the topic of China, right?
Yeah.
Now this last couple a perspective and some data points doesn't come from our podcast programming. It came from one of our newsletters, and check out this quote. This comes from Brad Setzer. He is a foreign policy expert, with one of the big prestigious think tanks. That's above my pay grade. Former U.S. Treasury official, and he was asked about the surplus China has when it comes to U.S. trade, right? And he says, "quote This surplus is here to stay. Just tariffing the bejesus out of China won't solve this problem." End quote. Now, Mr. Setzer knows a whole bunch more about global trade than I ever will, but being in supply chain, you and I know our share. I'm not in any diplomatic conversations, but I know trends, I know data, and this might surprise folks because in the last couple of years, one of the mantra has been either China plus one or desourcing from China and moving production, and we've seen some of those big shifts, and we'll continue to see some of those big shifts. But check this out: when it comes to world trade, China's exports advantage over its imports, right? More exports than imports, is 3x what it was in 2018. It amounted to $1 trillion for the full year of 2024, right? Get this, though. If that blows your mind, get this. The United Nations predicts that China's share of global industrial production will rise from 27% today. And despite all the headwinds, they're projecting it's going to rise to 45% by 2030. So despite all the sourcing moves and the other opportunities and some of the things that really smart supply chain leaders are doing, and some of the big corrections and policies that are rolling out, it's clear which way the needle is still moving. So that might excite some, it might confound others, but I think it's important that we all know and are familiar with the data-driven trends that that are factoring into all of our decisions.
Well, it's a hot topic. I guess it rolls us very nicely into another subject I wanted to raise with you. You had an inauguration this week, and I watched it live. Very interesting process. I've got to say, from a technical point of view and an interest point of view, putting the politics aside, watching that indoors gave so much better perspective on the audience. So it was great TV viewing, and I went to 5 different channels. 4 of them are US based, and then, well, probably 5 of them are US based, all 5. And they all had different angles, but it was so intriguing. And I've got so congratulations, new administration, a lot of very, very forceful changes taking place. I guess that rolls me into the issue of, what you're seeing happening moving forward in 2025. But before I ask you that, give me a couple of observations on this golden age that Donald Trump's talking about, and where that applies to the golden age of tech in particular. And I know you've been heavily involved with Kevin with his podcast lately. So what are a couple of things you see happening, the big movers in the area of tech?
Man, this is like $1 trillion. This is like a Chinese industrial economy sized question. So let me do this. I'm going to decouple a couple thoughts about new leadership here in the U.S. to the golden age of supply chain tech. How about that? So you probably, from what it sounds, and we didn't talk about this pre-show, but I had to work yesterday. So I didn't watch a whole bunch of inauguration coverage. And I think it's also important to note that it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day also in the States yesterday. And we focused his celebrating and protecting and growing his really critical legacy on the Buzz yesterday live. So that's really important. Now I think as it relates to politics, and you know me, Kim, you've known me over years. We get frank, but never political on supply chain now. But you can't have a supply chain conversation without talking tariffs. We've already mentioned the T word just in our last 20 minutes here. And there's all sorts of opinions on how this thing will play out. I did watch some of as President Trump was signing the executive orders and answering questions at the same time, which was just mind-boggling TV, I guess, right? That was a portion I watched. And he was answering questions about BRICS and tariff rates and this, that, and the other. Undoubtedly, there will be a more aggressive trade policy in the U.S. is a prediction. It's an easy prediction to make, right? But I just don't see the extent. When I get asked this question a lot, I think if President Trump is anything, he prides himself on negotiating, and he's throwing these rates out, I believe, while giving about 9 days to negotiate with our North American trade partners alone. And I don't see that being 25% with Canada and Mexico. I don't. I could be wrong, but I think going back to the China trend and the state of supply chain warfare, which I was writing about earlier, my personal thought is we must lean in to the most unique trading zone in all the world, which is North America. Those are our friends, our trading partners, our allies. And I think we can come up with a way effectively, even the bureaucrats in DC, to come up with a way to address some of the challenges they see while protecting the precious relationships that we're going to need as we address bigger travesties going on elsewhere around the globe. So it's not a big, bold prediction, but it's what I hope, what I am predicting and really hoping for in the months ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I guess one of the ones that's going to be really interesting from my perspective is the amount of nearshoring that took place with China moving a lot of production into Mexico, of course. And now the discussion or the comments coming out of the administration now for some time from the new president about the heavy tariffs to equalize around the automotive industry in particular to balance things out. So as you say, well, if you've read The Art of the Deal, then you start high and you come down lower. So that'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
It will. And it's going to be, I think we all need to prepare for the rodeo of supply chain practitioners. I mean, because it's going to be lots of friction and we're going to be challenged. But I think 3 C's that we've got 4 C's if we're going to add one, being China. And when you look at what they're doing and some of their intentions, that's more public than others. Currency, control, and chips, right? These are going to be some really hot topics. For years they have the Chinese government has wanted to challenge the U.S. dollar, right, across the globe, and they're making strides there, and that'll be interesting to watch. I think with control, I'm talking about whether it's the Panama Canal, whether it's other global supply chain infrastructure or other really important business infrastructure. They're exerting all sorts of investments and winning some relationships there. And then chips. I think I hate to be dramatic, Kim, but I've talked about this with people. They brought the same idea to me numerous times in the last few months. This advanced semiconductor current state. I got to tell you, there were certain things that took place in the run up to World War II, and a lot of it was focused on oil and certain decisions the U.S. government made to not sell oil to the Empire of Japan. And that ended up being one of the many root causes that gave us World War II, which is obviously one of the worst moments in all of human history. And I am hoping and praying that we can protect IP, protect national security, protect our allies, find a way in trade policy so we prevent this one topic that's fueling the modern digital economy with, some of the major players within that being, Taiwan, that we can prevent that from being a major global flashpoint. That's, I hate to be dramatic, but we also got to be frank about it. So I'm hoping that we can find a way.
Sure. Well, of course, one of the before we wrap, one of the positives that we perceive in this area, in this region, is the determination to put an end, as we've seen with the hostages, the first round of hostages being released in Gaza, and if that issue can be resolved and we can have a bit of peace and quiet in the Red Sea, that's going to be good for world trade, for logistics and supply chain, in particular on the maritime front. So everybody here is praying for that, and we're hoping that this change of government is actually going to precipitate that. So let's see how that plays out, and maybe we can have another catch up in the next couple of months, see how that plays.
Kim, I'm so glad you brought that up, because the Red Sea, in the midst of everything else going on, the Red Sea violence, which is still taking place, has not been on the headlines. What has been on the headlines is some of the supply chain support that is continuing to fuel some of the Red Sea attacks. So what I'm like you, I'm hoping a different approach will also be part of the new administration that will be able to finally get that under control and let the Red Sea back be a peaceful, special part of the world that fuels global commerce. Because as Hans Morman with DP World said, trade will prevail. I think is what he said. Trade will prevail. And you know what? It's good to lean into global trade, because that will help us solve many of these big and small problems that we're going to face and have faced moving forward.
Sure, no question about that. Scott, before we wrap, moving ahead to 2025, we've covered a couple of the big picture issues here, big ticket issues. Anything you're really looking forward to in 2025? Anything you see on the horizon to really on an upside for us in the supply chain world?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one overarching leadership approach, rule of thumb, that I think all organizations and leaders have got to embrace. And you've probably heard us talk about it. We've talked about it, but it's as relevant now as ever before because of how fast moving, and we're falling in love with all sorts of new technologies. We still have to work diligently in 2025 and beyond, right now, this hour, to understand the problems that we're trying to solve. I think it was Charles Kettering that said, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And what does that mean in supply chain tech? Well, once we understand what we're trying to do, what the goal is, what the problem is, then and only then do we find and apply the most appropriate solution, whether it involves tech or AI, or if it doesn't, right? So when I think about the future, moving ahead, that timeless piece of leadership advice is right between my ears. I feel it every day. But more tactically, I'm looking forward to getting out. I'm looking forward to being taking a page out of the one and only Kim Winter's book. We're going to be out more at in-person events in 2025 than we've ever been. Manifest, Gartner Supply Chain Symposium, SAPIX in South Africa in June, and plenty more. We've got new programming coming out, including more spontaneous live shows that's going to allow us to really cover hot, relevant topics right there in the moment. I've got some new co-hosts joining us, and National Supply Chain Day, whether you come join us and celebrate on April 29th with a more U.S. focus, or you take that notion, you take that spirit and bring it to wherever you are across the globe. I don't care what you do, as long as we celebrate, you join me in celebrating, not you, Kim, but all of your millions of listeners celebrate the craft of global supply chain, and most importantly, the people that make it happen, that don't ever get enough attention.
Brilliant. Well, look, I certainly look forward to keeping in touch with what's going on with your audience, with your special guests. Now, you have lives. It's still Monday, yeah. Every Monday you go live.
That's right. The buzz is
Yep.
alive and well. I think we're 6 years in. Every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time, you'll find live programming. And Kim, we're so fortunate when Kim pops in there and says hey or adds a comment or something. That opportunity is open for all, and we welcome all. But the buzz every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time.
It's about 8 p.m. my time in the evening. So really looking forward to staying in touch that way. And in terms of the in-person events, I've got a couple of invites. I'm clocking up a couple of hundred of MC activities over the last 20 years. So I've got 2 for the US this year. So we'll see. We may actually still catch up face to face, Scott.
We're going to do it. I've got, you know what? I am committing. Let's commit in 2025. The only thing I'm going to have to find a stool because I think you've got me by about a foot in height. So when we take our picture, but we're gonna make that happen in 2025. And Kim, I love your show. You've been doing this a long time amongst everything else you do, and some of your interviews and some of the learnings that I've seen from Logistics Executive TV. Keep up the great work, and we're honored. And again, it's a real privilege to collaborate with you as often as we have over the last 5 or 6 years.
Humbled, Scott. I'm just following the Joe Rogan of supply chain like I always have. So I'm taking a page out of your book, brother. Hey, awesome. Scott, for a wrap, how do people get hold of you? Give us the heads up on how best they can get in and win again. Listening time to get in on the lives, but how do they get hold of you best?
Yeah, two easy things there. We're going to take a page out of your book again. That's like a mantra here today. We're rolling out our new website. It should be live by the end of 2025, and it's going to blow the doors off. It's going to be such a more powerful resource for any supply chain practitioner out there looking for ways to advance what they're doing. So supplychainnow.com, right? And then of course you can find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. So check it out.
Awesome. Scott, thanks so much. We need another whole show on what you do in the community. And I do a lot with veterans and a lot of different community activities there. So maybe that's another show. But Scott Luton, CEO, founder, Supply Chain Now, the world's leading supply chain podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, man. And we'll be in touch soon.